dive right in. But we both spent a lot of time looking at your website, love the aesthetic and everything that you're putting out there, from the products that you're offering for sale to the amazing abundance of information and everything like that. Read
Thanks.
about, did you make the website yourself?
Yeah, I did. I've had a series of small businesses before this, none of which are still in existence, really. So I had a lot of opportunities to make mistakes on previous businesses that made starting this one pretty easy, really. Like I got to in terms of the steps to take, how to start a website, how to design it, all that. I'd already gotten to learn that on other businesses that I ended up outgrowing or leaving behind. So yeah, I like that aspect of it, actually.
Yeah,
The
I
big
think
aspect of
kind of like
communication.
the true. I remember speaking with someone, like a career coach once, about starting your, like, being an entrepreneur, and you have to be so comfortable with failing multiple times to be able to learn from your mistakes and be able to implement those moving forward. But I really, I loved reading on your website about how you met Sally Fox, who grows colored organic cotton, and kind of collaborating with her to turn her materials into fabric. And just wanted to know a little bit about, it sounded like that was almost over the course of a year between the time you met and launching Danu Organic, and kind of, just an overview of what happened between that meeting and creating the clothing line. Like, what were some of the big learnings for you or challenges in that process?
Yeah, it was a big waiting game. I guess I had an interest in starting a clothing line for probably like 6 years or so. I remember sitting down at a friend's house and just laying out a whole business plan and researching cut and sew places and fabric, and none of it felt right. I'm a very intuitive person, and until it feels right, I don't make a move. And so that was just kind of in the back of my head while I had a bunch of other jobs, tried other businesses, and I was pretty new to the Bay Area. I'd been there a year or two, and was previously, my career was mostly in the local food systems, and farm to table food, online grocery, that sort of thing. And so Fiber Shed was just a step away from that, and it was. Is it called? I was struggling with this. Slow Fashion Week is a month in September, October. Fashion Revolution Week. It was Fashion Revolution Week, and Fiber Shed was having a ton of events, and I went and saw Rebecca talk, and just I don't even remember what I asked her at the event. Rebecca Burgess, the founder of Fiber Shed, and she's like, "Oh, you should go to this one at this shop in 2 days." And so I went to that, and mostly I was just trying to find some community, because I was at the time self-employed as well before this business, and so I just was having a slow time making friends, and I was going to these events, and I didn't even research Sally Fox. I didn't look it up. I didn't know who she was. And she was there speaking. She was the main event. And I just fell in love fast with this plant. I tend to fall in love fast with plants, and things in general when it's right. But yeah, I was just blown away. I was also at the time having a pretty serious health crisis, where it was all my symptoms were showing up on my skin. I couldn't go on a fast walk without breaking out in hives from head to toe. And so I was just really cleaning up my own wardrobe, and I have not done a perfect job of that still, because I have a lot of really old clothes or fall in love with something. I'm not a perfectionist, but the majority of the clothes I wear are undyed or naturally dyed just for the health of my skin. And I would never say that that is what healed me, because I have moved beyond that, but I did a million things, and that was just one small, really easy step I could take. And getting color without dye was just amazing for a person who's having skin issues like that. So not only did I fall in love, but I was this is the best thing ever for people with skin health issues, which I have probably a good number of customers who have some sort of skin health concern, and that's why they shop with us. But yeah, and so at that meeting, Sally was actually taking pre-orders for the fabric, and I had the last slot, and I committed to $10,000 of fabric that very day, which was a huge investment for me. But I'm pretty risk tolerant and actually like love taking risk. And so I just did it. And she had the reason why it was so much, like I would have preferred to take less of a commitment, but she had a minimum she had to meet for the mill to even make it. And with all the orders she'd gotten already, she wasn't there. She wasn't barely close. And so I was like, well, if this is going to happen, I've got to place a big order here. And she was nice enough to not take the money until the fabric was there and I'd seen it. And I think she thought it would be like 2 to 4 months, and it ended up being a year. And I didn't see her over that whole year. And so I was just like, I don't even know if this is going to happen. Like, if it does, I'm here. But I started making samples with other clothes and just kind of hung out and waited. So, yeah. And then it showed up finally.
And Madeline's actually has a background in fashion, so maybe she can steer this question. But were you, so obviously, okay, so you were like designing the clothes, you were kind of coming up with the prototypes, and then once her fabric came, using those, with kind of like cutting and sewing and creating the products as they are today, or as they are like on your website.
Yeah, I like literally cut and stitched the first pair of underwear with a hand needle. I grew up sewing. I'm not an excellent seamstress by any means, but I mean, sewing was just like the norm where I was. Like, I went to quilting camp over the summer. Like, we mended our clothes. I had a little like square with buttons that I just sewed on. That was like one of my play hobbies. So it wasn't foreign to me. But during that year, I probably also got to like fail small a lot of times with setting up a network that would support the work that I'm doing now, like visiting factories locally, talking to other small local clothing designers who were super helpful and connected me with other right people to like get the thread, and somebody who could digitize the patterns to print them out at large scale. So over that year, it was like a pretty relaxed way to slowly make all those connections that I would have needed to make. So that was, but it wasn't busy. Like, there definitely wasn't much to do that year, a lot of waiting around. And I was also at that time, my main priority was actually sailing my boat from San Francisco to Mexico. So I was pretty focused on that, and the clothing fit in around it, because I'd never undertaken a sail like that. So that was almost like my job of the year.
That's so cool. It sounds like that timeline kind of like worked out for the best, because you had time to explore and be inspired, and at the same time make connections and plan out what your business is going to look like. We're in the process of making our prototypes right now, and so our fabric should arrive, I think, sometime this weekend, and I'm going to like hand sew the little baby clothes, and we're actually going to give them to some of my classmates who have babies, and so they're going to have put the outfits on and take pictures of their kids, and we're going to put it in our slide because we have class coming up next week. So we're really excited about that. But as far as it taking a year to get your fabric, how does that play into the lead times of your business? Like, how long do you generally have to wait for fabric now that you're kind of a consistent customer? And do you do things like pre-order so you know exactly how much to purchase so you don't have excess fabric? Like, how does that all work with timelines for you?
That's a hard question because it's a coronavirus year. So I was in business probably 8 months before March and coronavirus hit. And at that point, like, the mill shut down, the factory shut down. And then before that, the mill was hit by a hurricane. And so we've just had all of these unexpected hurdles that have nothing to do with a predictable timeline. And I'm still a really tiny business, not profitable, not placing huge orders of fabric. So it's still really unpredictable. And every time I've tried to predict something, it's been wrong. So sometimes it's earlier by a month, but sometimes it's like 8 months later than I hoped for. So I've almost just given up for the time being, predicting timelines. I did do a pre-order for a top that was really successful. I got a lot of pre-orders. But then coronavirus hit and my cut and sew closed, and everyone was so nice, but I wasn't able to get the tops out for like an additional 4 months. I don't think we had any angry customers just because our customers are the best, but I've kind of quit making promises and just say I don't know, because with everything going on right now with small businesses, it's just impossible to say. So I work with what I've got. There's a lot of variation in the brown fabrics. Like, we haven't even been able to like place an order and get the same batch again. So I'll have to sometimes go back to ground zero and recalculate the shrink and edit the patterns. So I'm really hoping this gets smoother, because it's a lot of work for me. But I am adding a white knit cotton soon, that's organic and grown cooperatively in Texas. And I think that will provide a lot more stability, just because I'm buying that from someone who makes a lot of white cotton for other people too. So I'm really hoping that will give me kind of a backbone in my business. We'll see. Hasn't happened yet. So unpredictable.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I really, my heart is like cheering on all of the small businesses to like make it through this pandemic, because we need all of that creativity and diversity of business. So
yeah, it's been
but
sad.
It's building a lot of resiliency. That's for sure.
Yeah, I have read that companies that start during recessions, pandemic years, tend to be around a really long time, which is my preference over, as much as I'd like to be famous tomorrow and financially well off. I'd much rather, if I slow down and like I'm honest with myself, have a company that's here for 500 years. So slow and steady the race.
Yeah, and we've been kind of pondering that idea a lot lately, like as far as like growth, what is the most appropriate way to grow? Like, how can we start small and like slowly grow, rather than the like fail quick kind of scheme? And so like with your business, you said you kind of got called to buy this fabric, and so there was like a certain amount to buy, but like what would you say, like for your businesses and like other businesses starting off, like what would be your advice on how to start small? Like what goals and intentions to make to like stay within that sustainability scale, rather than a large fail quick scale?
Yeah, I mean, don't take investor money is the huge one. I meet so many small business owners who are like really romanticized by the idea, and as much as I like my bank account not to hover near zero so much, like that immediately puts pressure on a business, no matter what size they are, to provide a return. So I think that's kind of if you choose that, you're choosing not to be a sustainable company. Honestly, I haven't seen it work out. There might be people who are mad at me for saying that, but every example that I thought was working out crashed and burned as I'm like really watching some people that I'm admiring. And so, yeah, it starts small. It's as simple as actually not making very much stuff, showing it to the people you're with. My first sale was at the Airbnb host. I was in like a shared bedroom in the Bay Area. And she owned Sally's socks already. And like, that's not why I chose that Airbnb, but she bought something from my car before I even technically opened. So, your community around you might be big enough to start with. And then frankly, like you don't have a lot of control over the growth of your company. Once you put it out there, like somebody could get on my website and order $1 million of stuff tomorrow. I don't think I have that much in my inventory, but it's not, then you have to like, what Elizabeth Suzanne did, I think is the only example I've ever seen of like choosing to try to stay smaller by limiting the number of orders you'll take in a week. But I mean, at my point, I'm still struggling to get enough orders to survive as a company, and I'm a year and a half in. So, and that's just like earning enough to pay the bills that actually are required to exist as a business every month. So I'm like somewhat in control of that, but not hugely so once you start your business. So I think you just have to like, if it's growing too fast, like lucky you, but then you might have to make some decisions that I think really you just have to choose not to sacrifice your original values that you founded the company on, and ask yourself, like, what boundaries do I need to put in place? And they'd be different for me than what Elizabeth Suzanne did because I'm not doing made to order. But I think that is the question. It's like, these are the values that I'm not sacrificing on. And you can't, once you start sacrificing for growth, you lose your purpose. So, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so, as we mentioned, you know, we're in business school, but we're studying sustainability, and so many times we find these disconnect between, like, you know, wanting to get money to be able to get a business off the ground, but also being committed to those sustainable values. And a lot of the times, the two are not aligned at all. In fact, they're very much disconnected. So really appreciate your perspective on that, and you know, have seen the same in a lot of, you know, especially I live in the Bay Area, and especially here, you know, so many startups are relying on investor money and wanting to get that, you know, big influx of cash to be able to take their business off the ground and grow. But I really think small and steady, slow, sustainable growth is so important, especially if you're, you know, mission aligned or mission driven like you are.
Yeah, and there are historical examples of investor money being paid back in like small percentages, or even like fiber sheds help people get money for nothing back. Just somebody who is more so acting like a generous donor redistributing wealth. So there are options, but they're few and far between. They're more like written about in history books every 50 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, one aspect of this course is, you know, we have to identify a market segment, who we're going to be targeting, you know, for this product line. Obviously, we've thought a lot about, you know, babies, because kind of like, you know, their skin's very sensitive, similar to your story. Parents don't want to have their kids wearing clothes with like harmful toxic materials on them. So that's one angle. The other is kind of like that conscious consumer, you know, folks that want to make a difference with their impact and support local, sustainable. So have you, you know, it sounds like you've grown your community really naturally. People find you through FiberShed or word of mouth, but what other, you know, thought or action have you taken to kind of like grow, you know, at least like getting some, you know, getting people to your website and buying your clothes so that you can stay afloat, or, you know, make enough profit to keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, before the pandemic, I traveled to an event every weekend almost, from like well, I started to add an event. So in-person events were what I did. And that's how I got almost all of my initial customers. And then they continued to order online for the most part, and most people placed a second order online. So that was super successful. I have a history of in-person events and door-to-door sales and stuff, so I'm like very comfortable at stuff like that. And I think that like I'm trying to photograph like these new black pieces that I'm wearing and the green pieces, and the specialness of the fabric like doesn't come across in a photo, even of the highest quality. Like you can't see the variation in texture, and I have been told and feel myself that it has energetic properties, and I think everything does, and this a little bit more so, that draws people in. So these things, there's no website that can communicate it. And so I think that was really, without that, I don't think I'd have a business. And they were very tiring and a huge investment, but totally worth it. And when the pandemic hit, I obviously couldn't do that anymore. And so I've been kind of like, what do I do? Because that was my specialty. Like that was what I did all through my life for other businesses too. And so I've been I had to shut down for 2 or 3 months because I lost my housing, lost my storage space. Like it was all okay. It was just I was headed to Europe, and I couldn't go to Europe anymore. So I had to like totally reinvent my life. And I did, and now I've got like the basics back up and running. And so lately I've just had enough mental clarity and space to be like, okay, how can I grow this in a pandemic atmosphere where I can't go to events and do what I do? So I'm going to start a YouTube channel, but not so much this one that I asked if I could put this up on. I'm going to start more like sharing just my lifestyle. Like we sail a lot, and so it'll be more just like day-to-day life, and hopefully I'll be always wearing my clothes. So I don't know if it's going to work. Like, I'm not exactly skilled with filming or technology, but it's been something that I've been considering doing for like 7 years before I had a clothing company. And I was like, this is kind of my only shot that I can think of. So I'm going to try that, but I wouldn't say it works yet. So,
That is
but
so
eventually,
cool.
once we can go to events again, those are awesome.
Yeah, you'll have to send us like a link to your channel when you get it up and running. That sounds super
Yeah,
cool. And I
yeah.
love the idea, like I am so drawn towards the minimalistic lifestyle and having less things so you can feel mobile and like feel free. How does that work? Like as a like being a creative when you have, you know, things being made, or if you need space to make a pattern or design something, is everything kind of digital and then you have like a warehouse and places where you store things? Like how does that work with all of your business processes?
Yeah, it's tricky, but like it's working out. I think it's working out even more smoothly with the pandemic going on because people are really used to like not showing up in person. But luckily, everyone's been like really okay with me changing addresses every shipment. And space is definitely a struggle. Like I just spent the last 2 months actually trying to find somewhere to live on land in Vermont, and due to a couple of reasons, I'm back on the sailboat and really happy to be here. But I thought that it would give me the space that I needed to have more investment in this business creative wise, a work table. I was just dreaming of a work table. But I actually have gotten so much. I've been back on the sailboat for maybe a week and a half, and I've gotten more done this week than I did in like your average 4 weeks in Vermont searching for a place. So I'm just really happy to be back. I have a little system. I'm emptying out one of my own clothing drawers, passing those clothes along, and I definitely need more space than I did when I left just because we're working on more designs right now. So I have one drawer for my work. It's definitely tricky. I ship a lot in and out, and then I hired somebody to ship for me. I was going to do that anyways, but my needs really changed when the pandemic started, and she's fabulous. She's shipping out of a workspace local to where she lives and also helping me with a lot of other things because she's very skilled in clothing design herself. So um, yeah, I have a very small team of one. She's part-time, and other than that, like the factory and pattern makers send me samples wherever I am. And I'm not moving around a lot right now, so it's not too hard. But it comes with its challenges. But at the same time, like I'm just a different person. Like if I'm not being fed in ways of like time offline and living in a creative space, like the challenges that come from living oddly, like I don't have a car, I just had to bike really far with a giant box, and it was kind of ridiculous, but it just added like such interest to my life that it keeps my brain like operating in this creative space that if I like go stay with my parents and watch TV, I lose right away. So I think it's kind of the only way I could be putting so much out in the world, but everyone's different. It's not a right or wrong way.
Totally. I love that too, because I think we get so comfortable with all of our conveniences and we kind of forget about like it can make our life really boring actually. And it can
Yeah.
take away a lot of value. And that there's so many interesting things that come up by living differently or doing things differently, like just to try something new or add interest. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think of that all the time. Like every inconvenience, if you can keep a good attitude about it, a lot of possibilities can unfold. So it's nice to go back and forth a little bit, just enough to like remember the pros and cons.
Totally. Totally.
Absolutely. All about perspective.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question I'm really curious about. So, you say on your website that your clothing is compostable, and you also have what is it? Well, I guess it's still kind of in the works, but the infinite return program, which I love, and that's something we've been thinking about too. But yeah, in terms of compostability of your clothing, I mean, have you tested out the products? Is it because you're using all natural materials that that they will naturally kind of biodegrade? Have you thought about, is this something your customers, when they're done with it, if they don't sell it back through the infinite return program, could they put it in their at-home compost or garden, or would they have to send it to like a, you know, industrial compost facility? Would love to hear a little bit more about that, since that's kind of like a, you know, big selling point of our company or our business idea.
Yeah, that's definitely not like my number one primary focus in the business. Like healthy clothes for everyone who makes them, grows them, and wears them is like my number one centering principle. And another business with a compostable number one centering principle is awesome too. But at the same time, it is super important to me. It's like at least a number 2 or 3. So not every material in my clothing is perfectly compostable, but I think that's laid out fairly clearly online, and we're here for customer service if people have questions. And most of it has so much longevity that we're just not at that stage yet where people have things to compost or put in the infinite returns program. That is totally up and running. We've had one piece of clothing come in through it, somebody who just wanted a different size, and we sold that piece of clothing to another customer. I think that program is like break even or maybe even a money loss right now. I'm not quite sure, but I'm really happy to have it in place. It's super exciting because it makes our clothes a little bit more accessible affordability wise for people, because they come back in sometimes quality that's going to have like 15 more years of life left, and we can still offer it for a little bit less of a price. So, but I mean, if I could make my clothes 110% compostable, I would. I just haven't found every material that I need at scale. And so I have some customers who are like very plastic free, which I respect. Like I was that at one point. I went 24 hours without drinking water because I couldn't find it not in a plastic bottle, and I'm not that intense anymore. But what's missing is our tags. I've been talking about that a lot on my Instagram today. They're made of, they tell me they're like a blend of 50% organic cotton. I don't even put that on my website because I don't quite believe it myself. It's like, if they don't have a certification and it's not 100%, it's not like their thing, I'm pretty cautious to believe anybody these days. And then it's printed with, I don't even know, like definitely a not organic, not vegetable based ink. So you have to cut that out. And then our pants right now have, it's 90%, I believe, percentage could be off, organic cotton and 10% plastic. So I feel like I'm doing pretty good finding even a waistband that's got some organic cotton in it. And that one I do totally believe they've got the certifications. And but you have to cut the waistband out. It's super easy. You just snip around the waistband, and that part, I mean, 90% of it will biodegrade in the landfill, which is better than average, and the rest can go in your backyard compost garden. Everyone has like different ways of composting. I'm not an expert on like which types of compost it can go into, but I know it definitely can go into the soil in your yard safely. It's going to biodegrade. My clothing is too new and special for me to do like an experimental bury, but I'm very confident it will biodegrade very well. And I think that I see a lot of clothing marketed as compostable that's actually made with like GOT certified dyes, but they're still very chemical based. And I personally wouldn't be comfortable putting that in my compost pile, though technically I guess it's okay. And I think it's also really important to remember that most people, I remember when I learned that like the things marketed as compostable actually could only go in a commercial compost, because most places don't have access to that. And so even big cities, it's very hard to have access to that. And so I think that's a really important consideration. If it can't go in someone's backyard compost, I don't really think it's compostable, but what are the chances that someone's going to have access to an industrial compost? So yeah. And otherwise, pretty compostable.
Yeah, totally. Like after living in San Francisco for a while, it's hard to even imagine that there are some places who don't have compost that you can just set up in your apartment. But then we went back to Des Moines and we're like, wait, we can't get compost here? Like we can't set it up? Like we need this. And luckily my partner, they have a farm. And so we just like bring it to the chickens every weekend. And that's kind of our solution. But of course, not everyone has a farm to bring it to. So it's like those little things of bringing it back to simplicity and making it easy for people to just put it in their backyard. And there's so many things too to think about. Like, our fabric that we ordered is organic hemp and cotton, and it's like completely compostable, but then there's all the little things that you have to think about, like the buttons and the elastic bands like you were talking about. So right now we have some tauga nut buttons coming in that we're really excited about, and our professor, he was like, okay, while you do your prototyping, you know, like you have to test it and test its compostability, but we're just about to make it and we're like so attached to it too. And so we're like, we don't want to put our sample, like it's so good, we can give it to one of our classmates and have it last for years and have them, you know, give it to other people who have babies or whatever. So we're just doing as much research as possible to figure out the compostability of, like, you know, cotton versus hemp or wool or whatever, rather than getting rid of our own prototype right now. So
we can bury some scraps. I think it's definitely worth testing from a theoretical perspective. And like once I have the bandwidth, I'll run a little science experiment on that. But yeah, I did want to just throw in that like I finally found, thanks to my customers, like if I'm wanting something that I can't find, I have a really highly educated group of customers. And so I'll just kind of throw my problem out. And that's how I actually found a natural rubber elastic. So I'm right now making my first bra and underwear sample with this 100% natural rubber elastic. So that I'm really excited about because the whole piece can just be thrown into the compost. But if the longevity isn't there, I think there is definitely a sustainability debate. Say underwear, it's kind of okay if they don't last for too long, but the pants that I sell that are like very expensive, they can last 30 years if they have a high, like a elastic that doesn't degrade in the wash. So from my perspective, like it's definitely debatable, but I would much rather that entire swath of fabric and work and dye last 30, 40 years, and not 2 months. Like that's also not sustainable. If I'm doing durability tests now, so I'm hoping that the elastic will last a lot longer than 2 months, the natural rubber elastic. But if it lasts 2 months, that's also not a sustainable solution. So it's tricky. But customers are pretty helpful. Right now, I'm getting a lot of like DMs about tag suggestions, and so far none of them have panned out. But
that's so cool that you have a support system backing you.
Yeah. So the compostability, you should test it, but you can test it probably with a scrap and get pretty good results.
That's a really good suggestion. And yeah, I mean, agreed, definitely. If this is something, you know, we've thought a lot about that too. And that's why we were kind of gearing towards like baby or toddler clothing, because they, you know, kids grow so quickly. And then when we're interviewing a lot of our friends or classmates who are parents, they're like, actually, I like to buy my clothing secondhand, or my friends who have kids who are a few months or years older will like give me their hand-me-downs. And so we're like, okay, we should figure out a way to kind of also, you know, have like a take back or a resell program, because we also don't, it's like great that it has this really sustainable end of life with being compostable, with these materials being biodegradable or compostable, but we also don't want, you know, people to have to like bury their kids' clothes in like 3, 4, 5 months. The most sustainable would be for them to last, you know, years and years and years.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that like I'll be able to give them a gift card and they can size up with the gift card. I can't do much because by the time I give people a shipping label and a return label and pay my employee to ship the order, like there's just not much money left in the circularity program. But I can give them a little something, they can buy a size up, and another family can wear that garment for 3 months. So as long as it's like a break-even program, I feel really good about it.
Yeah, and it's keeping clothes out of the landfill, which is, you know, a huge problem we need to think about as well. Yeah, in terms of just like affordability, I mean, how do you balance like covering the costs? Like obviously you're working with like a really transparent, sustainable supply chain. You know, you're a small business, you are like very hands-on, and you know, like your customer is going to see that cost as well, right? Because it's not just like some product you're like manufacturing in China for cents on the dollar. How do you consider that? And, you know, would just kind of love to hear a little bit more about your method in terms of like how you, you know, determine pricing to make sure that it's profitable for you, but also affordable and accessible for your customer.
Yeah, I'm still experimenting with that for sure. There's not a lot of good guides out there, so it was a really, really tricky part of starting my business. I Googled what I could, but people just don't share that when it's working for them. And I'm not at a place where I'm like, this is working for me. I'm still not quite sure. So I mean, I just kind of like to, I think I'm really lucky that I'm starting now and not like 5 years ago, because people really used to be like, why would I buy that? It's so expensive. And I mean, I'm keeping my costs like definitely towards the lower end, probably sometimes too low. And it's really expensive. Like I have to think before I buy things this expensive. It's definitely an investment, but I mean, it's also comparable to like what our clothes used to cost before the Industrial Revolution. Like we just had a lot less clothes. They were valuable. We mended them. We gave them to our friends. We passed them down. It's just the true cost of what it costs to make these things and actually operate a business, which that's not even being covered yet. So um, yeah, it's tricky. I mean, if I could sell really affordable clothes, I would just love to. And I think that most slow fashion businesses agree. And I'm adding in the white cotton, which I think will bring more affordable pieces to people, which I think will still be really exciting. And I can still naturally dye them. And so hopefully that helps a little bit. But, and as I scale, like I'll be able to drop my prices, and I will drop my prices once I'm able to cover my cost. And, but that could be a long time from now. I don't even know. Like as you scale, there's all these other costs, and sometimes we think it's going to get cheaper, but actually like you didn't consider that now you're providing healthcare for 50 people and you need a bigger warehouse, and like these costs also grow as businesses grow, so it can take a while to really benefit from scale. So I don't know is the answer. It's pretty tricky. And I do think that, I mean, just like as I'm shopping or with it when I'm with members of my family that are shopping, and like we see something and we're like, oh my gosh, what a great deal, and I'm like, let's see, $4 for a dehumidifier. How many dollars went to the child that made it? It's like you get what you pay for, and it's a privilege to be able to afford clothing like mine. We have layers and layers and layers of privilege that enables that. But I also think there's like an element of responsibility, and like there's also beauty in scaling down and buying a lot less. When I started to do that, like I was raised in a pretty typical American fashion with a heavy side of gardening and sewing. I just like really fell in love with the one expensive item I had, and like everything else paled in comparison. So I wore it a ton more. So I got way more wears per a garment, or like uses per a knife. A knife was probably my first investment in the like slow item category.
Incredible. I know knives are like very, very, having had like terrible knives and now having some really nice knives with invested in, it makes a huge.
I chop with a knife now. And so I think that like if you actually, people have calculated this out and figured out that they're getting like 270 wears per one of their heavy investment shirts, and it's really about love. Like they love that piece so much more, and not because it costs more, but because of what it is. And so I mean, cheap clothes can last a long time, but we aren't drawn to pick them up as much. So if we're not getting as many wears, it really does come down to that financially, which it is really difficult to like think about and calculate, and it's not really how we shop. But my personal experience has been that when I do save and invest in something a little bit nicer, I get a lot more use out of it. But it's tricky.
And it adds like so much more value too. Like you said, you love it. You have this emotional connection. It makes me think of my mom. She gets these like oversized, really big cotton sweatshirts, and then she wears them until they literally have holes in them and the sleeves are raggedy. And then she still continues to wear them that way because she's like, now it's in the best version. It's totally broken in, so comfy. This is how I like it. And so it's just like having those little kind of stories and value with the clothing is adds so much more.
Yeah, I saw a pullover of Sally Fox's that was like 30 years old, and it was ragged and full of holes, and I'm just like, this is gorgeous. I can't even create this all the time. So I feel confident that it'll age into that, but it might take 30 years.
Great. Well, I guess I have one more question, Olivia. I think we made it through our list. We've kind of just been winging it for a little while, but after COVID, when things kind of start to come back in favor of small businesses, what's your vision of how you want to grow? Like, do you want to grow into distributing to more small businesses? Would you want to open your own brick and mortar shops in the future where you can hold events and kind of come back to that? What is your kind of vision of what the future looks like once things pick back up again?
Yeah, well, first, I mean, I think that the COVID crisis is actually really friendly to small businesses. It's also really awful to them. It's very stressful, but people, customers, more than ever, like when I had to shut down, I got a message from somebody who's like, hey, I'm like sending you pictures of people wearing your clothes just to help you out. Like, good luck. Thank you. And so, like, I think people, customers who care about small businesses know that, like, now really matters. And like going into the holiday season, a lot are making a super intentional shift to try to like put more purchases with small businesses. So it's like a pro and con situation, and I don't have enough data to know like how it's affecting my small business particularly, like if it's better or worse. Like I just don't have enough data to go on. We're too new. Business is not steady. But in terms of the future, so nice to imagine the world kind of open again. But also like I think that could be a really long time away. So for me, like what this has really pointed out is that I need to stay super agile and have as much like diversity in ways of getting my clothes out in the world as possible. So that would look like just having a lot of different channels. Like I definitely want more wholesale partners to have my clothes in stores because like I said, people just see it and fall in love with it. Like I can't tell you how many times people just like walk up to me in the grocery store and be like, what are you wearing? And it's like, it's not the designs, it's like the specialness of the fabric that you can only feel by seeing. And so I'd really love that. I think retail partners are super hesitant right now to take on new inventory, just given that like we don't know if there will be a lockdown, and if they're relying on in-person foot traffic, that's got to be. I don't have a retail business, but I assume it's heavily, heavily, heavily reduced, if not zero. So I would love to see more of that. I would love to have my own brick and mortar retail store. I would love to have like a space that was super integrated where like people were sewing and dyeing in the back room behind like a glass window so customers couldn't like talk at them all the time, but they could see how their clothes were being made. And that's like my dream. Getting there is probably a long ways away, but at the same time, like we do need space, so it could happen. And definitely keeping the online channel going and strong, and diversifying it a little bit too, like getting into more online retail partners and just experimenting with like subscriptions for underwear and things like that. Hopefully, yeah. So just keeping in mind really that like something like this could happen again. Like if I can get through this, I can get through anything, and I want to stay prepared and not like be caught unprepared. Just because I think that makes a really healthy, well-rounded business that can support my life and the life of my employees should anything go wrong. Not necessarily like world or pandemic related, but maybe like a fabric shipment or a totally messed up batch of orders that like could really hurt us financially. Like if we have that diversity built in, I think that would provide a stable background. And the in-person events, I think I might be a little bit done with them for now. They're a huge complication logistically. I love ones that are like super targeted, like the Fiber Shed event, because it's really more about community, and I just like love being there. But I was like going to a ton of events. And so I think more like showing up where people already know and see what we're doing, maybe pop-ups locally at stores, where we know we have like a big base of people who want to try things on, and less like just show up at every event in town, which is what I did to start. So yeah, that I think kind of covers it. And I also really hope to be able to like steady out my inventory flow and my like production cycle so that I can give people a better estimate of restocks. And just like I'm out of stock of stuff all the time. So I really hope to like steady that out by being able to keep a little more in stock, and definitely expand the team. Like I could really use help with social media right now. I get very, very strung thin on that. So I can't afford help with social media at the moment, but I really hope that like I can grow into having a bit more of a team so that I can stay focused on just focused. I like everything I do, but I would just like to do a few less things so I can go deeper in a few things.
Totally
Yeah.
understand.
Well, we are rooting for you like 100%, 110%. All I can think about is like Christmas and my birthday are coming up, and I would love nothing more than to buy something off your website and support you, and I feel
for you guys. It's exciting, your project. Good luck with the little things like tags, and if you find something, let me know. I know it's possible.
Yeah, something I hadn't personally thought about, so that's really helpful. And yeah, really excited to just, send us the link. Well, I'll follow up with you and send you this recording over email, and then, send us a link to your YouTube. We'll continue following you, and really excited for you and your journey moving forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, happy to talk to you guys today. It's a nice conversation.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time. You lead such an interesting life, and you have such a positive and refreshing outlook on, the way business is going. So thank you. I really appreciate it. This has been so fun.
Yeah, happy to talk with you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.